So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna break this down in primal cuts. You know, we'll take it basically all the way apart into muscles. The most important thing to understand is that this is a deer and a pig. So I could be working on antelope, elk, moose, caribou, same exact way. So we got a lot to do in a really short window of time. So obviously there's a lot of fat on here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut down here and cut some of this fat so I can get in there so I can see. So right here is a seam. So we're just gonna take this seam and I'm just gonna come right down along there. And I want to peel all this meat off later, so I'm just going to throw this inside there. So now we can see the tenderloins. I like to take the tenderloins out first. Everything is based on the bone structure. So right here, so you need to feel. You want to feel the bones, the chine bone, these finger bones over here, and this part of the pelvic. So we're just going to come in right along the pelvic, right along this chine bone, and cut on that side. And then on this side, we'll do the same thing. We're just going to cut way up here along the pelvic bone, and right behind that chine bone. We make a cut right where that seam is right there, and then come down and just literally pull that out. Now, if the animal was hanging for a long time, we'd get a really poor yield off of this because this would all dry up. We don't need to age that because it's already tender. What we're gonna do right now is just peel this off. And I'm not going to worry too much about, I can leave the meat on the carcass or I can leave the meat on the leg. So I'm going to leave the meat on the carcass. So I'm just going to pull this. That's where the country spare ribs come from. Just going to follow this right along here. So now we got a front leg. So now we just take the other side and I'm just going to pull. Some people will cut a slit in here so they have a grip. And that's, I think, what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna cut right in there on that shank. So I have a handle. And when you're pulling, you don't just pull one way. Move it up, move it down, pull it around so you get a good feel for it. Don't be afraid of it. And the most important thing right here is if you look here, of course, that there's shot placement. Right there in the top of the neck. We don't want to age an animal for a week with that like that. We want to cut that out of there. So on this is the front left leg. You know, we got shank here, and then we have what we call the shoulder quad here, and this is where we take the flat iron off. So on your pigs, what we're going to do is we're just going to take this and cut around this, and we want to get that muscle up as far as possible. So once we get to that joint, you can see it moving. So we want to just cut to that joint, cut to that joint, put it on the table, and just kind of twist it to pop it through that joint. You don't have to do it that way. We can just bone it off like I did the other one, just hold it up and bone it off. So now we have what we call the shoulder quad. So on the back side, just to show you on the back side of this shoulder blade, some people just cut like this, and peel this piece off. This is just some trim. So this muscle on the front of the shoulder blade, we're just going to loosen it up. I'm just going to then follow this down and pull this off that bone. And then pull this off this bone. Turn it like this.
That's photography. He wasn't even here.
Then you can feel the shoulder on the deer. It's much more, what do you want to call it, pronounced. You can feel the bone coming right down. And you know that you're in what we call a flat iron steak because there's a big heavy tendon in there. So you get to the edge of this shoulder blade. So that piece comes off. Then on this side, do the same thing. Come down this side. And on a pig, it's not always as identifiable as it is on a deer. So there's your shoulder blade. So this right here, this is the flat iron steak, which is that most tender cut. So on a little pig, there's not much there. On an elk, you got a really nice piece of meat there, and it's nice and big. And then this is what we call a shoulder cloth. So we just peel this off. So this would be good for stew. This, the shoulder clod, is a good roast. So this would be a shoulder roast. So this one is the flat iron. This one is, I guess, called the fish. It's the part off the other side of the shoulder blade. This is the shoulder clod, a little bit of trim, and then we've got our shank with a little bit of trim. We peeled the front legs off. So now on this deer, this is more identifiable, but here's that beautiful backstrap. So right here is the line where we will go to take that off. On this one, you really can't see any line because it's got so much fat content. So I'm just gonna cut right down right here. And again, depending on the state, will depend on what you leave on the carcass or not legally. Meaning, like in Alaska, you can't leave any meat between the ribs. You have to take literally every last ounce off that carcass. So we can take this and make bacon out of this. We can make pancetta out of this. We can make a roulade out of this. Matt would have loved to take this and barbecue this. So I'm just gonna take this literally all the way down off the neck. So there's our slab of bacon and our flank steak right here. We're gonna take the whole back straps off. But basically what we're gonna do, so these are all the ribs. So that would be your prime rib. Here's your New York strip. So right in here is part of the pelvic bone, and it's called the H bone. And we're gonna take our knife, thank you. And you can see the seam right here. And we're just gonna cut right around that H bone all the way to what we call the feather bones. The feather bones are the bones that stick up along the back. And then we're gonna take our knife, and we're gonna feel, you gotta use your fingers here and get right behind these finger bones. This is probably one of the most important steps on a pig or a deer, is that these bones come up on an angle, but they call it a saddle because then it goes straight in. So if you follow the contour, you're gonna put a big gash in a premium cut of meat. Once you get down here a little ways, then you have to go straight in. Because if you don't go straight in, you're gonna ruin the best cut of meat on the animal. And I go all the way down to the neck. So we got to the feather bones. We're just gonna take the knife. And pull that right off. So on this one now, I don't like to split the pelvic bone. I've seen a lot of people split the pelvic bone and then they open up these two inside top rounds. They're the most tender cut of the hind leg. We're gonna do 3/4 of this on the hanging. And then the other quarter we're gonna do on the bench for safety reasons mostly. So I'm gonna just cut right down through here to that pelvic bone. It's important when you get to the pelvic bone to remember that there's holes in the pelvic bone. So if you're doing the gutless method, you could still cut the bladder with your knife or your buddy's finger, because you can cut through the pelvic bone. So I'm just gonna take my knife down, and I call wings. So there's a wing here on the back of the pelvic bone, and there's a wing here, which is part of that H bone. So once you know where they are, you can figure out where and how to cut around them. So on this cut, I went all the way down to the bone. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow this, and I'm just going to cut. The ball joint is right where this seam goes down. So what I do is I'm going to cut to that on that ball joint, and then I'm going to cut around you see the angle that I got the knife going, and I'm going to cut around that H-bone. So I cut on the outside of the H-bone. I cut all the way in here to the ball joint and out. So on this side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut to the ball joint, get to that pelvic bone, and cut down right along the bone on what we call that H-bone. I call it that wing. This is the big wing. Then on the back side, I got another wing right here. So I'm just going to come around this wing, and you can feel it with the knife. It's way out there, and then back to the tailbone, then back to that. And you can get your knife to it, and you can go out. So I'm just going to cut down on this side, get to that wing, part of that pelvic bone, and I have to come around this one. And if you leave a little meat there, it's all right if you leave a little meat there. So the reason why we're going to do this and get it to just that point right there is because if I try to take this off, all this weight is going to make that flip and everything's going to fall on the ground. Or this, because you're taller, is going to get hooked on your nose as it flips up. So, and I'm talking from experience. So we'll take it from this point and bring it to the bench. So again, if I was doing this, worried about chronic waste, the head of the animal would be on there. We've never cut through any bone. We get to this ball joint right here. This here. You can push that piece down and just pop this. And there's the ball joint. All we're doing is cutting around the ball. When you get through the ball joint, all we're doing is cutting the tendon that's in the joint. Then go underneath. Don't go straight down. Go underneath and pull this muscle off that pelvic bone. And remember, this, you can put the knife right through that pelvic bone. So you want to be careful. So now we got this beautiful ham. So now we'll just flip it this way. And you see how I'm pushing it back. Oops. Pushing it back this way rather than down. So we get through this ball joint. Now underneath. I could cut through here and take this shank off, meaning take this muscle off and then take the shank and the heel. We're not going to do that with the hind legs. So I'm just going to start right here on the shank. And if you're making stock, this round bone is the best bones for stock. So I'm just standing this up and cutting around this bone. You could do this in the field, laying down, while it's even on the animal. So this would be the outside. So this is the back right leg. That's the bottom or outside. That's the knuckle, and that's the tri-tip. So I'm just cutting around so that you can see. I'd have it on the inside. So I'm just going to cut right down to this bone and just peel it off. Now there's some, again, wings and nuts around here that you don't have to worry about it. If you're leaving a little bit of meat on there, it's all right. And when the animal's hung and aged, this is a lot easier too. This meat's actually still warm. And you can do what I'm doing here, but you don't want to cut these muscles into small pieces while it's warm, because the muscle didn't relax and it's going to be definitely going to be chewy and tough. So you want to leave it in muscles. So just to put this leg back together, here, this is the shank off the bottom. This is what we call the heel. This is the top or inside round of the hind leg. This is that knuckle. This is the tri-tip. This is the butt. And this is the bottom round. So again, that's why we don't make round steaks, because look what's in there, you know, out of venison, because it's going to taste gamey. So this piece, so that's the top round. Every top round has what we call a decal or a cap. So if there are times when I'll actually do this while it's still on the bone. So so that's the shank and the heel. This is very tough. So then here, this is the eye of the round. So this one also, it looks like a tenderloin. So some people call it the mock tender because it looks like a tenderloin.
And that's the tri-tip?
No, that's the eye of the round.
Eye of it.
And this one here, this one is the bottom round. And you always know that you're on the bottom because of the connective tissue, the silver skin on either side. We got the top, the bottom, inside, outside, eye of the round, just a little bit of trim there. This here is the butt, which whoever cut that up didn't take much of that with it. And then this is the tri-tip, which on an elk or a moose, the tri-tip is big. On a deer, it's not very big. It's basically just steaming. But that's usually roasted or barbecued. This one is the sirloin tip, known as the knuckle or the football. Everybody, I learn as much from you as you learn from me. So we're all learning from each other. Everybody's got input. Everybody does things a little different. And this is just one way. There's 101 ways to skin a cat. This is an easy way. So it doesn't matter if it's beef or veal or lamb or deer or elk or caribou, their bone structure is the same.